Time at rest, exploring the past, slowly. Homo sapiens began their long journey beyond Africa roughly 65,000 years ago, slowly spreading across Europe, Asia, and Australia. Yet one vast land remained beyond their reach. It would take nearly 50,000 more years before humans arrived at the final continental frontier, North America. Now, drift back 15,000 years to a world locked in ice. Before you lies Beringia, a frozen land bridge stretching between what we now call Siberia and Alaska. You stand with your clan at the edge of the known world, unaware that you are about to enter a place no human has ever walked before. The land is immense and silent, filled with sweeping plains, distant mountains, and towering animals that have never learned to fear people. It is a world both intimate and unknown, where every step forward is an act of discovery. These people were not so different from us. Their hands shaped tools with care and intention. Their eyes searched the skies for signs of change. Their hearts carried curiosity, courage, and concern for one another. They were kin in spirit, human lives shaped by the same hopes and uncertainties we still carry today. Across frozen valleys and forested corridors, knowledge traveled quietly from one generation to the next. They learned to read the wind and clouds, to follow the subtle marks of animals across shifting ground, and to transform stone, bone, and wood into the means of survival. Movement was slow, deliberate, and guided by memory. And the land remembers them still. Beneath tundra and grasslands, beneath waters that now cover ancient shores, traces of their presence endure. Their story is one of resilience and quiet determination, of hardships faced, small triumphs celebrated, and paths laid down that would shape the future of an entire continent. This is an invitation to walk beside them across deep time, to share in their challenges and discoveries, and to recognize, within their journey, the enduring reflection of ourselves. Before continuing, viewers are invited to support the creation of long-form historical documentaries like this one by subscribing, liking, and commenting. Let us know where in the world you are tuning in from and what time it is for you as this journey begins. These gestures help keep these stories alive and enable more of our time, research, and care to be devoted to future film projects. With that, let's step back together through deep time, tracing the long and often subtle forces that have shaped humanity and the world it inhabits. Long before any human footprint pressed into the soils of North America, before the idea of continents divided by oceans had meaning, human communities lived across the vast northern reaches of Eurasia, in what is now Siberia, during the late Pleistocene. Small bands of people moved through a world shaped by cold, wind, and immense distances. This was not a frozen wasteland, but a living land, harsh, yes, yet deeply familiar to those who called it home. These ancient peoples lived at the edge of what human bodies could endure. Winter temperatures could plunge far below freezing for months at a time, yet archaeological evidence shows that people were not merely surviving, they were adapting with creativity, patience, and knowledge passed down over countless generations. Sites such as Yana River RHS, dated to over 30,000 years ago, reveal human presence far north of what was once thought possible. Here, people hunted woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, bison, and horses, using carefully crafted stone, bone, and ivory tools. Their presence tells a quiet truth. Humans had already learned how to live with ice long before they ever crossed into a new continent. Life in ancient Siberia revolved around movement, but not constant wandering. Families followed animal herds across open steppe tundra, gathering plants, fishing rivers swollen with meltwater, and repairing tools beneath long daylight hours. In winter, they sought sheltered valleys, riverbanks, or areas with reliable fuel sources. Hearths uncovered at archaeological sites show repeated use, suggesting places of return, lands remembered, not merely passed through. Fire was central to survival and culture. Controlled fire provided warmth, light, protection from predators, and a place for social life. Around the hearth, hides were softened, food was shared, tools were shaped, and stories, though now lost to time, were likely told. These moments of stillness mattered as much as movement. They formed bonds within families and across generations, anchoring people emotionally to landscapes that, to outsiders, might appear unforgiving. Archaeological sites like Malta, Buret, near Lake Baikal, offer glimpses into the spiritual and artistic lives of these communities. Small carved figurines made of mammoth ivory, often interpreted as symbolic or ritual objects, suggest complex belief systems and a deep relationship with animals. Burials from this region show care for the dead, with grave goods placed intentionally beside the body. These were not transient bands without memory. They were societies with traditions, identity, and a sense of belonging. Clothing technology played a critical role in allowing humans to thrive in such climates. Although textiles do not survive well in the archaeological record, indirect evidence, such as bone needles with finely drilled eyes, indicates tailored clothing made from animal hides and fur. This was not crude wrapping, but fitted garments designed to retain heat while allowing mobility. Each stitch represented knowledge accumulated over millennia, refined through trial, failure, and teaching. Genetic research has added another layer to this story. Ancient DNA from Siberian remains reveals populations known as ancient North Eurasians, a group that contributed ancestry to both later Europeans and indigenous peoples of the Americas. These findings confirm what the archaeology suggests. Siberia was not a peripheral zone, but a central homeland in human history. The people living here were not isolated. They were part of a broader web of human movement and connection, stretching across Eurasia. The environment itself was constantly changing. Glacial cycles advanced and retreated, reshaping rivers and valleys. Volcanic eruptions occasionally darkened skies with ash, cooling temperatures further and altering ecosystems. Earthquakes shifted terrain, while fluctuating sea levels exposed new lands and submerged others. These changes were not abstract forces. They directly affected hunting routes, animal migrations, and seasonal camps. Over time, humans learned to read the land signals, the movement of herds, the freeze and thaw of rivers, the subtle changes in wind and snow. Children born into these communities grew up learning the land as an extension of themselves. Knowledge was not written, it was lived. Which valley offered shelter from winter storms? Which river bend yielded fish in spring? Which animal behavior signaled an approaching season? These lessons shaped survival. Elders carried memory, linking past experiences to present decisions. In this way, culture became a living archive, constantly updated, yet deeply rooted. Importantly, there is no evidence that these people understood themselves as standing on the brink of a continental journey. They were not driven by destiny or conquest. Movement was gradual, shaped by curiosity, necessity, and familiarity with northern environments. Over generations, seasonal paths extended farther east, following animals and resources across the broad plains of northeastern Siberia. By the time sea levels dropped enough to expose what we now call Beringia, humans were already well adapted to Arctic and subarctic life. They possessed the tools, clothing, social structures, and ecological knowledge needed to inhabit cold, open landscapes. The land bridge was not a sudden invitation. It was simply another stretch of known terrain unfolding beyond the horizon. In this sense, the first step toward North America was not a crossing at all. It was a continuation of a long relationship between humans and the northern world. The people of ancient Siberia were not preparing to become the first Americans. They were living full human lives, raising children, honoring the dead, adapting to change, unaware that their footsteps would one day echo across an entire continent. Their story does not begin with arrival. It begins here, in the quiet persistence of families who learned how to belong to the cold, and in doing so, unknowingly shaped the future of human history. As the climate of the late Ice Age deepened its grip on the northern hemisphere, the Earth itself quietly reshaped the map of the world. Vast quantities of water became locked within expanding ice sheets, lowering global sea levels by more than 100 meters. In the space between what are now Siberia and Alaska, a broad expanse of land slowly emerged. This land was not an icy bridge suspended over an abyss, but a continent-sized region, wide, windswept, and alive. It is known today as Beringia. For thousands of years, Beringia existed as a world unto itself. Stretching over 1,000 miles from east to west, it connected two continents while belonging fully to neither. Crucially, it was not buried beneath glaciers. Instead, Beringia formed part of a vast steppe tundra ecosystem, one of the most productive biomes of the Ice Age. Grasses, sedges, flowering plants, and low shrubs covered the plains, sustained by dry conditions that limited glacial growth. This environment supported immense herds of grazing animals: mammoths, steppe bison, horses, musk oxen, and caribou. Humans did not enter this land suddenly. They drifted into it gradually, following familiar patterns learned in Siberia. Seasonal movements extended eastward as herds expanded their ranges. What may have begun as temporary hunting forays slowly became longer stays, then multi-generational occupation. Over time, Beringia ceased to be an edge of the known world and became a homeland. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that people lived in Beringia for thousands of years, possibly isolated there during periods when massive ice sheets blocked passage south into the rest of North America. This idea, known as the Beringian standstill hypothesis, proposes that early populations remained in this region, adapting to its unique conditions while developing genetic and cultural traits that would later spread throughout the Americas. Rather than rushing into a new continent, these people waited, unknowingly, patiently, while the Earth decided when passage would be possible. Life in Beringia required deep ecological knowledge. Winters were long and dark, marked by powerful winds and extreme cold. Summers were brief but productive, with extended daylight fueling plant growth and animal migrations. Humans adjusted their movements to these rhythms, planning hunts, gathering fuel, and storing food in anticipation of scarcity. Stone tools found across the region show careful craftsmanship designed for efficiency and reliability in a land where waste could be fatal. Shelter was another critical adaptation. Though organic materials rarely survive, evidence suggests the use of skin-covered structures supported by wood, bone, or ivory. Mammoth bones may have formed the frames of dwellings, their massive ribs and tusks repurposed into architecture. Inside, hearths burned steadily, providing warmth and a focal point for social life. These were places of shared labor and shared memory, spaces where stories and knowledge flowed as freely as heat from the fire. Beringia was not a static landscape. Climate fluctuations brought cycles of warming and cooling, subtly shifting vegetation patterns and animal behavior. Rivers braided and rerouted themselves across the plains. Permafrost cracked and heaved. Volcanic activity in the broader region occasionally sent ash drifting across the sky, dimming sunlight and altering seasonal growth. Each change required human response, reinforcing adaptability as the most essential survival trait. Children growing up in Beringia would have known no other world. The open plains, the distant mountains, the seasonal return of animals, these were constants shaping identity. Knowledge of the land was not abstract. It was learned through observation and repetition, how snow behaved underfoot, where animals sought shelter during storms, how wind direction signaled weather shifts. Elders carried long memory, recalling winters of scarcity or abundance, and these memories informed decisions that could mean the difference between survival and loss. Importantly, Beringia fostered connection rather than separation. People moving through this region were not crossing a boundary, they were inhabiting continuity. The animals they hunted had ranges that ignored future continental divisions. Rivers flowed without awareness of hemispheres. The land itself made no distinction between Asia and North America. In this environment, the concept of arrival loses meaning. Genetically, this prolonged period of life in Beringia left a lasting imprint. Populations living here developed distinct genetic markers still found in indigenous peoples of the Americas today. These connections speak to time, long stretches of shared ancestry shaped by common challenges and environments. Beringia was not merely a passageway, it was a crucible where populations were refined by cold, distance, and endurance. There is little evidence of large-scale conflict or displacement during this period. The land was vast, resources abundant, but seasonal. Survival favored cooperation within groups and careful negotiation with nature, rather than dominance over it. Tools were shared, techniques refined, and knowledge preserved through teaching rather than conquest. This slow, cumulative process laid the foundation for everything that would follow. Eventually, subtle changes began to unfold at the southern edges of Beringia. Glaciers to the east and south shifted, thinning and retreating in response to warming phase. Meltwater carved new valleys. Coastal routes opened as ice loosened its grip. These changes were gradual, unfolding over many lifetimes. To the people living in Beringia, they would not have appeared as dramatic thresholds, but as new possibilities, new valleys to explore, new shorelines to follow. When humans finally moved beyond Beringia into what is now Alaska and the broader Americas, they did so not as strangers entering an unknown world, but as experienced inhabitants of the North. They carried with them skills forged over millennia, relationships with animals and landscapes, and a deep familiarity with living at the edge of ice. The story of human migration into North America does not hinge on a single crossing or moment. It rests here, in Beringia, a land that no longer exists, but whose influence endures in the people, cultures, and memories that spread across an entire continent. The land did not open all at once. For thousands of years, immense ice sheets, the Laurentide to the east and the Cordilleran to the west, covered much of North America. These glaciers were not static walls of ice, but slow-moving forces, advancing and retreating with the rhythms of climate. At times they pressed together, sealing the continent shut. At other moments, they loosened their grip, creating narrow passages of land and water that shifted from generation to generation. When humans began to move beyond Beringia, they did not encounter a single, clearly defined route. Instead, they faced a landscape in motion. One path followed the coast, where the Pacific Ocean met rocky shorelines and kelp forests thrived beneath cold waters. Another route, inland, gradually emerged between the ice sheets as warming climates opened an ice-free corridor. These pathways were not mutually exclusive. Different groups likely explored different options, guided by animals, seasons, and opportunity rather than a shared plan. The shoreline offered a remarkable abundance of food: fish, shellfish, seabirds, marine mammals, and edible plants. Kelp forests created underwater ecosystems rich in life, forming what some researchers call a kelp highway that stretched southward along the Pacific edge. Humans accustomed to rivers and seasonal lakes adapted easily to this environment, crafting watercraft from hides and wood, and developing tools suited for fishing and shoreline foraging. Though rising sea levels have submerged much of this ancient coastline, traces of early coastal life remain. Archaeological sites such as Monte Verde in southern Chile, dated to at least 14,500 years ago, suggest that humans moved along the Pacific margin far earlier than once believed. The presence of wooden structures, plant remains, and tools at Monte Verde reveals communities that were settled, organized, and deeply knowledgeable about their surroundings. These were not fleeting camps of desperate migrants, they were homes. Inland, as glaciers slowly retreated, meltwater surged across the land, forming vast temporary lakes and powerful rivers. The terrain was raw and unstable. Floods reshaped valleys. Sediments shifted yearly. Yet life followed these waters. Animals moved into newly exposed grasslands, and humans followed, reading the land as they always had. The earliest evidence of interior occupation, including sites like Bluefish Caves in the Yukon and Paisley Caves in Oregon, suggests the humans entered North America earlier than once thought, possibly more than 15,000 years ago. The first steps into the Americas were not triumphant marches into empty land. They were cautious explorations shaped by uncertainty. The animals were familiar yet different: larger bison, unfamiliar predators, new prey behaviors. The plants required experimentation, careful testing passed down through observation and memory. Survival depended not on speed, but on attentiveness. Fire once again served as a constant companion. Camps were established near water, sheltered by terrain, where hearths provided warmth and continuity. Stone tools found at early sites show variation rather than uniformity, suggesting that knowledge adapted quickly to local conditions. Blades were reshaped, hafting techniques adjusted, materials selected from what the land offered. Innovation emerged not from invention alone, but from listening to the landscape. The earth itself continued to change beneath human feet. Glacial lakes periodically burst their icy dams, unleashing catastrophic floods that reshaped entire regions in days. One such series of events, known as the Missoula Floods, scoured the Pacific Northwest, carving channels and depositing fertile soils. These events would have been witnessed by human communities, remembered as powerful stories of water and loss, embedded into oral traditions long before they were recorded in geology. Volcanic eruptions added another layer of uncertainty. Ash from eruptions in western North America drifted across wide areas, altering plant growth and temporarily driving animals away. For humans, these disruptions demanded flexibility. Camps were abandoned and re-established. Routes shifted. Knowledge expanded. Despite these challenges, humans spread steadily southward and eastward, not in a single wave, but in many small movements, families splitting, rejoining, adapting. Some groups remained near coasts, others followed rivers deep into the interior. Over generations, familiarity replaced novelty. What was once unknown became mapped through experience and memory. Crucially, there is little evidence of sudden population replacement during this time. Instead, continuity dominates the story. Genetic data indicates that early populations diversified slowly as they spread, shaped by geography and environment rather than conflict. The land itself guided differentiation, encouraging regional identities while maintaining shared ancestry. Children born in these new lands grew up without knowledge of Beringia or Siberia. Their world was defined by the valleys, forests, and plains around them. Elders carried stories of colder lands to the north, but these were memories, not destinations. North America became home not through conquest, but through time. The first human footprints in the Americas were light, patient, and responsive. They followed animals, water, and seasons. They adapted to floods, fires, and cold, without seeking to dominate them. In doing so, they began a relationship with the land that would deepen and diversify over thousands of years. What followed was not a single culture or moment, but a flowering of human possibility, one shaped by innovation, regional knowledge, and an enduring connection to Earth. As humans spread across the vast and varied landscapes of North America, they carried with them knowledge and skills honed over tens of thousands of years in Siberia and Beringia. Yet, these new lands demanded innovation. The story of the first peoples in the Americas is one of adaptation as much as migration. And nowhere is this more evident than in the archaeological record of the Clovis and Folsom cultures, two of the most remarkable Paleo-Indian traditions. The Clovis culture, flourishing roughly between 13,500 and 12,800 years ago, represents one of the earliest widespread technological adaptations to the diverse environments of North America. The most iconic innovation, the fluted spear point, was a carefully shaped tool designed for efficiency, durability, and precision. These points were not simply weapons, they were extensions of human thought and skill. Shaped with the purpose of hunting some of the largest mammals on the continent, including woolly mammoths, mastodons, and ancient bison. Clovis campsites, such as Blackwater Draw in New Mexico, reveal organized settlements where families work together to craft tools, process meat, and gather resources. Here, the landscape was both classroom and pantry. Observation, patience, and collaboration were essential for survival. The people of the Clovis culture were strategic planners. They studied animal behavior, tracked migration patterns, and coordinated large hunts with precision. Evidence suggests that Clovis hunters did not merely pursue animals. They anticipated movements, worked collectively, and adapted tactics to seasonal and environmental conditions. They understood that timing, preparation, and cooperation were as vital as strength or courage. These skills, honed over generations, allowed Clovis groups to thrive in a land still being shaped by retreating glaciers, fluctuating rivers, and shifting forests. Following the Clovis era, the Folsom culture emerged across the Great Plains. By approximately 12,800 to 11,000 years ago, the ecological landscape was changing. Many of the largest Ice Age animals had begun to decline, forcing humans to refine their strategies. The Folsom people became experts at hunting the massive plains bison, developing narrow, fluted points optimized for speed and accuracy. The Folsom toolkits reveal not only technological sophistication, but also an intimate understanding of animal anatomy, herd behavior, and the rhythms of life on the plains. Each spear point, each blade, was the result of accumulated knowledge, trial and error, and the guidance of elders teaching the next generation. Innovation extended beyond hunting technology. Early humans experimented with seasonal settlement, plant gathering, and freshwater resources, demonstrating an awareness of ecological cycles. Hearths and temporary shelters reflect communities capable of planning and foresight. The repeated use of certain locations suggests memory and tradition, places that became familiar and safe. Over time, regional adaptations gave rise to distinct cultural identities. Groups living in the forested East developed different tools and strategies from those in the open plains or along coastal regions, yet all shared the same foundational knowledge inherited from their ancestors. The environmental challenges of the time were profound. The Younger Dryas, a sudden climatic cooling period beginning around 12,900 years ago, brought abrupt shifts in temperature and precipitation. Ice sheets expanded, rivers shifted course, and landscapes that had once seemed familiar transformed into harsh, unpredictable terrain. Volcanic eruptions blanketed wide areas in ash, temporarily altering ecosystems, while earthquakes reshaped valleys and river paths. Human populations responded with flexibility. Camps were relocated, hunting strategies modified, and new tools developed to meet the demands of changing conditions. Adaptation, rather than domination, defined their relationship with the earth. Social organization played a critical role in survival. Cooperation and communication were essential, as families and small groups relied on each other for hunting, food processing, and protection. Evidence of shared tool-making and exchange suggests that knowledge traveled across vast distances, binding communities through practice and innovation. Trade networks likely existed, passing materials, ideas, and perhaps ceremonial objects from one group to another. These connections reinforced identity and skill while allowing local adaptations to flourish. Humans of the Clovis and Folsom cultures also maintained a profound spiritual and symbolic connection to the world around them. Carvings, figurines, and other artifacts suggest a rich inner life, where animals, landscapes, and natural cycles were observed, respected, and incorporated into rituals. The mammoth was not simply prey, but a figure of reverence, a symbol woven into communal memory and possibly into stories that guided social behavior and moral understanding. Burial practices further reflect thoughtfulness and care for the dead, hinting at a culture attuned to life, death, and continuity. The arts of daily life were inseparable from survival. Clothing, for example, was essential for warmth, protection, and mobility in cold and variable climates. Bone needles and evidence of sewing suggest tailored garments that allowed for agility and endurance. Shelter construction, too, displayed ingenuity. Skin-covered dwellings, supported by wood or bone frames, provided warmth and security, while hearths became centers of social and ritual life. Even the smallest details, how hides were treated, how tools were hafted, how fires were managed, reflect a culture that valued skill, observation, and careful planning. This era also highlights the importance of learning in memory. Children grew up observing and participating in survival practices, while elders guided the transfer of knowledge. Stories of animal behavior, weather patterns, and past successes or failures likely shaped decision-making, giving each generation a repository of experience far beyond instinct alone. Knowledge, in this sense, became a living force, preserved through practice and story, rather than writing. By the end of the Folsom period, North America was no longer an uncharted land of discovery. It had become a continent of communities, each uniquely adapted to its environment, yet connected by shared ancestry, technology, and survival wisdom. People were no longer simply migrants. They were custodians of the land, observing its rhythms, responding to its challenges, and creating cultures in harmony with its cycles. Moreover, the innovations of the Clovis and Folsom cultures set the stage for future generations. Knowledge accumulated in these early periods informed later coastal peoples, interior hunter-gatherers, and Arctic migrants. Each new wave of human movement, built on the careful observations, inventions, and stories of those who came before. Through tools, techniques, and cultural traditions, the first Americans left an enduring legacy, a template for adaptability, resilience, and human ingenuity. At its core, this chapter reminds us that the human story is not merely a tale of survival or conquest. It is a narrative of connection to land, to animals, to climate, and to each other. The tools, strategies, and cultures of Clovis and Folsom peoples reflect thoughtfulness, curiosity, and care. They demonstrate that innovation is much about observing, understanding, and responding, as it is about creating. And in tracing their footsteps across plains, valleys, and rivers, we see not strangers, but distant relatives, humans whose lives and choices echo through time, shaping the land and the history that followed. By the time humans had fully settled across the interior and coastal regions of North America, the continent had become a mosaic of diverse landscapes, each demanding unique adaptations and fostering distinct ways of life. From the dense forests of the east to the arid deserts of the southwest, from the wide-open Great Plains to the rugged Pacific coastline, humans learned not only to survive but to thrive, shaping their lives around the rhythms of nature and the resources each region offered. In the forests of the eastern woodlands, communities relied on a combination of hunting, gathering, and early plant cultivation. Stone tools were crafted for woodworking, while bone and antler implements allowed for precise hunting of deer, elk, and smaller mammals. Seasonal patterns dictated movement. Families followed game migrations, harvested edible plants in spring and summer, and sought shelter in sheltered valleys or along rivers during harsh winters. Hearths glowed warmly inside temporary dwellings, smoke curling into the sky, as children played and elders recounted knowledge of the land, passed down through generations. These forests were alive with opportunity, nut-bearing trees, medicinal plants, and rivers teeming with fish offered sustenance and shaped cultural practices. On the Great Plains, the wide expanses demanded different strategies. The bison became central to survival, providing meat, hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, and sinews for cordage. Folsom and later cultures perfected the art of hunting bison with coordinated drives, sometimes using natural features such as cliffs or rivers to corral herds. The plains fostered mobility, encouraging the development of seasonal camps and trade networks. People moved in tune with the animals, interpreting subtle environmental cues, wind direction, snow cover, river levels, to anticipate migrations. This intimate knowledge of landscape and fauna connected humans more deeply to their environment than mere subsistence could describe. Along the coasts, human adaptation was equally remarkable. Fishing and shellfish gathering complemented hunting of terrestrial animals, while driftwood and coastal plants were used for tools, clothing, and shelter. The Pacific coast, in particular, offered rich resources, from salmon runs to marine mammals, supporting relatively stable settlements. Early watercraft, simple dugout canoes or skin boats, enabled access to offshore islands and estuaries. These communities likely developed sophisticated knowledge of tides, currents, and seasonal marine patterns, an understanding critical to survival and cultural continuity. Trade and exchange became increasingly important across these regions. Obsidian from volcanic regions, exotic shells, and specialized stone tools traveled hundreds of miles, evidence of networks linking disparate groups. Knowledge too moved with these goods. Techniques for tool making, food processing, or hide preparation spread across cultural boundaries, creating a web of innovation and cooperation. These interactions demonstrate that even in the vast and varied landscapes of Ice Age North America, humans were not isolated. They maintained connections, shared insights, and enriched one another's ways of life. Environmental challenges continued to shape daily existence. Glacial meltwaters transformed landscapes, creating lakes, marshes, and rivers that shifted course over time. Humans adapted by observing these changes carefully, learning to predict hazards, and adjusting settlement patterns. Knowledge of environmental patterns became a form of cultural memory, a repository of wisdom, essential for survival. Humans also nurtured spiritual and symbolic lives in response to their environments. Rituals, storytelling, and symbolic artifacts connected communities to the cycles of life and death, seasons, and landscape features, embedding humans firmly within the living world rather than above it. Children growing up in these diverse regions learned from immersion in the environment. They observed hunting techniques, plant identification, weather patterns, and animal behavior. Play often doubled as education. Tracking games honed observational skills, while tasks around the camp taught responsibility and cooperation. Knowledge was accumulated and transmitted orally, forming a tapestry of experience woven across generations. Memory, skill, and observation were as vital as physical endurance or courage. By this time, North America was not defined by a single people or a single way of life. Instead, it was a continent of many worlds, each with its own rhythm, its own patterns of movement, and its own cultural innovations. Migration continued, but it was guided by understanding rather than urgency, by curiosity rather than conquest. The diversity of adaptations also underscores the continuity of human experience. Across forests, plains, and coasts, similar principles prevailed: observation, cooperation, planning, and respect for the environment. Humans were connected not just to their immediate surroundings but to a larger story of survival, innovation, and cultural expression. Their lives illustrate the profound capacity of humans to adapt thoughtfully, creatively, and empathetically to the world around them. This chapter reminds us that North America was never a blank canvas. It was already alive with history, memory, and ecological knowledge by the time early humans fully explored and settled its varied regions. Each group, each seasonal movement, each innovation added to a collective human legacy, creating a continent rich with life, ingenuity, and connection. It was a land where the human story intertwined deeply with the rhythms of nature, a story not of dominance, but of participation, observation, and enduring presence. By weaving together technological innovation, regional adaptation, and spiritual awareness, humans transformed North America into a living, dynamic landscape of culture and life. From the bison-grazed plains to the abundant coasts, the forests and rivers to the high mountains, they shaped their survival not merely through tools or weapons, but through relationship with land, animals, and each other. It is a story that continues to echo in the landscape and in the people who followed, connecting us to these early inhabitants as cousins, neighbors, and distant relatives. As thousands of years passed since the first humans entered North America, the story of human movement did not end with the settling of the interior or coastal regions. The continent's far north remained one of the last frontiers, a land of extreme cold, shifting ice, and unforgiving seasonal cycles. Yet human ingenuity, curiosity, and resilience would once again lead people into these high latitudes, giving rise to the Paleo-Eskimo, Thule, and Inuit migrations, and leaving a legacy that persists in the Arctic today. The Arctic environment is stark and demanding. Winters extend for months with temperatures well below freezing, while summer days bring relentless light but short growing seasons. Sea ice dominates much of the year, shaping not only travel routes, but the very availability of resources. Humans entering these regions required specialized knowledge, tools, and social structures. They could not rely on large herds of terrestrial megafauna, as in the plains, more on the familiar forests of the east. Instead, they turned to marine mammals, fish, and migratory birds, crafting hunting strategies and technology tailored to this icy world. Early Arctic migrants, sometimes referred to as Paleo-Eskimos, demonstrated remarkable adaptability. The careful layering of sealskin and other furs, combined with techniques for waterproofing, enabled humans to thrive on frozen tundra and sea ice alike. Tools were equally advanced. Harpoons, bone needles, sleds, and kayaks allowed people to hunt efficiently, travel over snow and ice, and access marine resources with precision. This wave of migration was driven less by need than by opportunity and knowledge. Humans were drawn northward by abundant marine resources and by the unique challenges of Arctic life, pushing the boundaries of their adaptability. Genetic evidence indicates that these populations were connected to earlier Beringian peoples, carrying with them both cultural traditions and ancestral memory, yet they developed distinct technologies and survival strategies in response to their new environment. The Arctic landscape itself was both a classroom and a challenge. Seasonal shifts dictated movement. Summer brought fishing and seal hunting along coasts and rivers, while winter demanded travel over snow and ice to locate terrestrial prey or access safe hunting grounds. Humans learned to read ice conditions, interpret wind and weather patterns, and predict animal migrations. Sled dogs, first domesticated in Siberia and brought across Beringia, became essential companions, allowing travel over long distances and assisting in hauling supplies and game. Marine mammals such as seals, walruses, and whales became central to Arctic survival. Hunting these creatures required precision, patience, and intimate knowledge of animal behavior. Whale hunting, in particular, demanded coordinated effort, advanced tools, and complex social organization. Every aspect of life, from food and clothing to tools and transportation, was interwoven with ecological understanding. Humans did not merely inhabit the Arctic, they became part of its intricate web of life, responsive to rhythms and cycles that had existed long before their arrival. Shelter locations were chosen strategically, travel routes were adjusted seasonally, and subsistence strategies evolved alongside environmental change. The Arctic taught resilience, patience, and the importance of shared knowledge. Social and cultural life flourished, even in such harsh conditions. Communities relied on cooperation, with hunting, childcare, tool-making, and shelter-building shared across groups. Oral traditions preserved critical knowledge about animals, sea ice, and weather, ensuring survival across generations. Rituals and symbolic practices maintained connection to the land and its creatures, embedding humans within the broader Arctic ecosystem spiritually, as well as physically. Over time, these Arctic migrants, ancestors of the Thule and Inuit, developed technologies and strategies that allowed them to thrive where few other humans could. They became masters of their environment, traveling long distances, hunting large marine mammals, and enduring winters of near-total darkness. Yet even with these achievements, the story remained one of continuity, rather than conquest. Knowledge, culture, and identity were passed down and adapted, linking each generation to those who came before and to the land itself. Today, the genetic and cultural legacy of these Arctic peoples endures. Descendants carry traditions, practices, and adaptations shaped over millennia, illustrating the continuity of human life in extreme environments. The Arctic migrations highlight the extraordinary flexibility and resilience of humans, demonstrating that even in the coldest, most remote landscapes, people can thrive through observation, cooperation, and deep engagement with the world around them. The story of Arctic migration completes a long arc that began in Siberia, traversed Beringia, and spread across the Americas. It is a story not of conquest, but of patient exploration, adaptation, and enduring connection to the Earth. The first humans of North America were not simply migrants or hunters. They were careful observers, innovators, and participants in a living world. Their lives remind us that human ingenuity is measured not only by tools or technology, but by the ability to read landscapes, learn from animals, and thrive in harmony with the rhythms of nature. In closing, the legacy of these northern peoples is profound. Every tool, every shelter, every carefully planned hunt reflects millennia of accumulated knowledge. They carried the wisdom of their ancestors while expanding the frontiers of human life. In the ice, wind, and sea of the Arctic, humans proved that even the most extreme environments could become a home, a testament to resilience, creativity, and enduring human connection across space and time. The truth, the land remembers them, and through them, so do we.